G'day and welcome. My name is Mark Bennett, and today we're going to break open the topic of tithing. This is a new initiative by the Emmanuel Community. Today we're going to hear from a couple of different people. We're going to hear from the leadership team, and they're going to talk about some of the vision for Emmanuel and tithing and how that works, it interplays. And we're also going to hear a couple of testimonies from members of the community. Hello and welcome, gentlemen. If I can get you to introduce yourselves. We have Shane first and Patrick second. So, Shane.
So, I'm Shane Bennett, moderator of Emmanuel. I've been part of the community since 1976.
And I'm Patrick Keady. I turned up somewhere in the late 90s and musician mostly. I've been in the worship ministry for the last 15 odd years, now moving in the role of Director of Ignite Youth.
Wow, thank you very much. Shane, I'll start with you. Can you outline the community's vision for tithing?
In outlining the community's vision for tithing, I think one of the things that we have to say first up is it's not about giving to projects and it's not about supporting this thing or that thing. That tithing is really about giving to God. And I think that's a really important principle to start off with before we say anything else about it. That if we miss that, we miss what's at the very heart of it. And giving to God is an act of surrender and it's an act of gratitude. And so Emmanuel didn't think of tithing. It comes to us from the scriptures and, the ongoing belief of the church that it's important for people to give to God as God has generously given to us. And so we have four basic principles that we operate out of, and one which is really clear right from the very beginning is to give generously. We're not into legalism. You must give this amount, but we do believe that, the Old Testament spoke about tithing, giving a 10%. New Testament talks about giving everything. In that, we want to emphasize of giving to God as generously as we can. The second is to give regularly. In terms of the functioning of a community, it's really important to be able to try and work out what your budget is for a year. Just those practical sort of things that you know what sort of income you're dealing with, how far you can extend yourself, and the things you can do and the things you can't do. So giving regularly. Giving to Emmanuel as a priority. Like Emmanuel, we understand, is a call of God. And so it's a place in which you make your response to God. Now, people do that in different ways in their life. Now, we see Emmanuel as a particular call, and that call is the place where you make your response to God. So what we would say is that you give to Emmanuel a priority in terms of your giving generously. The fourth thing is to give God room. Because, we might have defined things or commitments that we make, and that's perfectly normal and natural to do, but there may be additional things that we're convicted of to give to particular projects or as a part of our response to God. That we want to take something on and really give it our support, because we're convicted this is really of God, and we want to jump in there and get behind it. So they're the four basic things, and I guess what I'd underline with all of that is to say we take a very pastoral approach as to generous giving in the community, and we can say some more about that later.
That's great, thank you so much. How does the community use the tithe that it receives?
Okay, within the community there's always two dimensions. There's the internal dimension and the external. There's what we speak about as communion, our life together as a community. And that's made up of all sorts of different elements, which includes the practical running of the community, the administration of the community. It also includes all our internal dimensions, which involves things like our teenagers. It's focused on the various missions that we have. We have to remember that Emmanuel is never an end in itself. Like Emmanuel exists in order to mission.
Yeah.
You know, I think we've got to get that clear in our hearts, our minds, that so we seek to provide a rich life for the community in terms of its practical expression, but at the same time, so much of our focus is to be the people God has called us to be for others. And that takes us into the area of mission. And there's such a wide dimension of mission as we've lived it for nearly 40 years now. The value of having resources available is that it enables us to respond to the Lord's direction as He calls us. And from day one, we've understood that God calls us in a variety of ways, in a variety of seasons. And so, you know, the money that is collected in giving is used for the internal life and for the well-functioning of the community, and then it's used for the mission of the community.
The community's been going for a long time now, 35 years or longer.
Nearly 40.
Nearly 40 years. And so many people have been faithful for so many years.
Correct.
And I think, honestly, it's very easy to say that this community would not exist and the works would not exist without those faithful people.
Yep.
One thing I really want to try to tap into and speak about is that sense of these young families who are passionate about what the community's doing, but are also really struggling in living the life and trying to work out tithing and money and how that all works in benefiting God and, you know, working with the community to build something that they are innately passionate about,
Correct.
But trying to make that work and the difficulties surrounding that. I wonder if we can talk about that a little bit.
By all means.
Yeah.
If you go back a few years, Chanel and I were an engaged couple when we joined this community.
Yeah.
And so we've lived our whole life in the Emmanuel Community. And our whole life in the Emmanuel Community has been on a ministry wage. And for the majority of that time, on the lower end of a ministry wage. So we know what it's like to have $2 left on Sunday night, waiting to get paid on Monday. We know what it's like to have to pray before we go shopping to find the bargains. And we've lived that life all our lives. Mm-hmm. You know, I first started tithing when I was 18, and because I was convicted that there was a truth involved in it. Mm-hmm. Now, it's true that in life there's really practical considerations, and this is where it's really important that money is not just this private sort of thing, you know, that we can actually get support and that we can get help in talking to our mentor, in seeking some wisdom from others in our financial planning, in the ways that we use, the ways that we spend our money. How do we take on a Christian mentality with regard to money? And that's the challenge. And the other element is that there's always been that dimension of sacrifice. Mm-hmm. You know, we're not here to build our own kingdom. We're here to build God's kingdom. And so, yes, there is sacrifice involved in that. And we've seen it. We've seen it time and time again. But as I say, that doesn't mean that you put somebody under the screws and try and squeeze more out of people than they can give. You know, like we're not like that. And so it's about trying to support young married couples and single people in their approach to giving, and to be as generous as they can, and to be responsible with their finances.
Absolutely. What about for you, Paddy?
Yeah, so just listening to Shane talk, what's going through my head is that, and maybe it's just the whole being a musician thing, but I don't think so. It's the whole concept that, for me, giving is part of our worship. And so worship is not just about singing songs or turning up at Mass and just something you do once ever when you get together and you sing songs, but like that Roman scripture talks about, that worship is sacrifice of our whole lives, of giving our whole life, so that everything we do, including how we give of ourselves in every way, is part of our worship. And I really believe that for myself. It's part of worship, and that God is looking at the heart. And so often we compare, or couples can compare themselves to other couples and think, or to give or to tithe, I've got to, we compare ourselves with how much we have against other people, and then how much we give against how much we should give, and this whole expectation thing. But it comes back to me that God is not, that's sort of secondary in God's mind. He's just looking at the heart, that there be, as well as a receiving and giving. And I'm reminded of that scripture which says that each should give as they've made up in their mind to give, not under compulsion, because God loves a cheerful giver. And so I think that's really important for each couple, just like saying, how many kids will we have? Well, you don't have to match what other couple X down the road does. I think God is looking at each family individually and saying, what will you guys pray about? And how will you guys respond? Forget about them, what about you? And really, it's what you come to in your conscience going, I feel good about this, we feel good about this, we've prayed about this, and we're going to give something, and we're going to give as much as we can, and we're going to be generous in our giving. And then really the results are what, before the Lord, you come up with. So, yeah, that's my reflection on the whole thing.
So, Paddy, as the director of Ignite Youth, you're in charge of what the Lord is calling this new ministry to, and where it's going, and the outreaches of this new ministry, and reaching those young people's hearts. Where is Ignite Youth going, and what is the Lord calling it to?
Yeah, good questions. I mean, I think more and further and forward. If I was to put words around it, I'd say more, further and forward. That's what I'd say, because that's where he's lead. It didn't come out of nowhere. Really is what has grown over the last 15 years for where we are now, for example. And even just something like the Ignite Conference. Everyone knows the Ignite Conference, and it seems like this big show that runs itself. It is so not a big show that runs itself. It's sweat, blood and tears all the way. Mm-hmm. And this is a community on the ground who are all throwing their energy into it. So that's just begun to start to go annually. We used to give ourselves a break, come up for air and go, try and catch our breath. But we felt compelled to move that to every year now. So there's a new tension, a new energy of momentum moving forward, just with that alone, with the Ignite Conference. Now, on top of that, you get the sense of that, yes, we've rebranded, and there's Ignite Youth, and we have a leadership team that we're trying to grow. So there's new leaders who you can see, you can pinpoint, and you can go, oh my God, I'd love to have this leader on board, on this person. And they may not even be in our community, but they may be someone you can see that God is shining a light on. You go, would be great to be able to bring that guy on board or that girl on board. Mm-hmm. And because you don't have the money, and Shane could relate to this, some other ministry that does says, here's the magic carrot, and they wave it, and really good people, we're just not able to afford. So leadership, I would love to be able to invite more people into leadership, because everything needs leadership. Speaking of which, we've just started our own leadership course for our senior high schoolers. Yeah. So we're wanting to raise up leadership with it. So this is some of the initiatives that we're starting on. So I feel like it's not when we get the money we'll start some new things. We're actually expanding as we speak and wondering, how are we going to get the money? How are we going to keep up? And this is what we've always done as a community, I think we'd say. God, we look to you to provide. We check, is this what you want? Yes, we feel God saying, keep going forward, keep doing this stuff, and he will come to the party. But the way he comes to the party is through real people and real support, yeah.
Well, thanks. Shane, leaving from there to, well, not leaving, but broadening that picture for the whole of Emmanuel and what the Lord is calling us to and leading us towards, what does that look like?
I think it's a response built on the last 40 years. Yep. And I think we've got to give credit to our own history, yep, and what God has done with us. And so that means many things now. Like Pat was just talking about the youth dimension. And even as we speak, we're in the process of opening a new centre for blind eye ministries, and our outreach to the homeless, building the relationship with Indigenous brothers and sisters, pro-life ministries. All of these things are changing not only our local circumstances, but they're actually changing our community as well.
Shane, can you tell me a little bit more about the internal workings of the community and how that works in ministries?
Sure. I think one of the things that's really important is the culture that we're seeking to build, because we've got to see that there's, in fact, more than one platform of mission. One of our platforms of mission is, in fact, the community life itself. Mm-hmm. And it's developing a new culture, a culture that is an alternative to a lot of what's going on in our Australian culture. And it's that discussion that says that the gospel challenges culture. Now, some of the places where we see that is with our young families, and we have a vision and a hope for our young families. It's not a vision where young families get isolated, but it's a vision where young families are supported, where they have common values with other young families, where they see their children growing up. And, you know, I think one of the things that we want to do and part of the culture that we want to build is a valuing of our older members. You know, so many would share that as you reach a certain age, you can feel discarded. And that's one of the tragedies within our culture, that oftentimes people feel put aside. We want to build a community that has a culture that embraces and makes a place for and a respect for those who have gone before us. And it's probably bigger than we can cope with at this point in time. Mm-hmm. But it's like, as somebody once said, God would never insult us by giving us a vision that we could achieve on our own. Yes. And so, you know, whether it's blind eye ministry, whether it's youth ministry, you know, I hope that we can launch further into outreach, into parish ministry. I don't think any of that's going away anytime soon. But the whole thing of giving is really important for us to be ready, you know, ready for what the Lord presents to us as an opportunity. You know, our goal is to see God's kingdom come on the earth.
Yeah.
And so the hard, cold reality is that dollars are actually important in that process because God uses people.
Yeah. And can I say, you get a lot of joy. You get a real buzz. Like I just know for myself in giving, whenever there's a project or something and you join yourself, you do. Jesus said, where your money is, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so as you sow into a particular project, your heart can't help but sort of follow there, and you get so much joy. And it sounds like a cliche, but it is a cliche because it's true, that in giving you do receive. And giving is one of the funnest things I get to do. I'm always looking for spare cash to be able to say to my wife, what can we give to? There's something, because it is such a blessing to know that you're making a difference in the lives of someone.
Really want to thank you both for being with us today and for sharing the visions. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Pleasure.
Welcome, guys, and thanks for coming tonight. We wanted to break this topic open a little bit more by asking some questions of different people in and around the community. And just want to start by giving you guys a chance to introduce yourselves. We first have Tom Ducro, and we got Emma Price as well. And Emma, do you want to just give us a little rundown on yourself?
Sure. So I first had my first introduction to Emmanuel Community through Ignite Conference back when I was 14. I went in year 9. And since then, I've kind of just loved all the events that Emmanuel Community does. Like I went to like every single fuel and every single summer camp and conference. And so it's just really been in the last couple of years that I've been starting to get to know the community on a more personal level, with like going to Mass and everything like that.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you very much. And Tom?
Yeah, well, Mark, I've been in Emmanuel for over 30 years and love it, and thank God that I am still a member of Emmanuel and enjoying the lifestyle as much as ever.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Emma, I want to start with you first tonight. I want to ask what your opinion is or how you've experienced tithing as a young woman in today's day and age, and what that's looked like for you.
Sure. Well, I think, first of all, like, I am so thankful that I've been lucky enough to learn about tithing at like a young age. And I feel like it's really benefited my life in quite a few ways. Probably the main two ways has been firstly in helping me to trust God better. I think even though we put so much emphasis on money in our society, I think it's such a basic and easy place to start with trusting God. And through trusting God with my finances, I'm able to trust Him a lot more in other areas of my life because He is so faithful and is so just like dependable in my finances, and other things aren't as big of an issue. And I think the other main fruit that's come from tithing in my life has been being able to not have such reliance on money, and being able to just be comfortable. Like my happiness and my joy and my faith doesn't come from how much money I have in the bank account. I can have weeks where I can struggle, or I can have weeks where I'm really comfortable, and it doesn't change because it's just not the most important thing in my life. Like, it's not a priority in my life how much money I have. So.
Did you ever make a conscious decision about, okay, I am going to really commit to tithing and to give and make that decision? Was that ever a conscious decision for you? Do you remember that?
Yeah, definitely. So I think I always kind of felt somewhat important and I would always give, but it only really became an active decision, like, yes, no matter what, every week 10% as soon as my pay hits my account. I went to this church and was listening to this preach on tithing, and I really just, the woman who was speaking, she was really making an emphasis on how it's not even just like what the money goes towards, it's like what it does in your own life. And I was really hit by that, and I decided, yes, that's what I want to do in my own life. And so now I don't even care. Like, I trust Emmanuel with my money and everything, and I trust what they're going to do. But even if Emmanuel wastes all my money, I'm just so thankful to be tithing because of the benefit it does in my life. Like, and I think I love looking at tithing in that way. Like,
Absolutely. Okay. Tom, you and Sharon have been a part of the community for 30 years. What does tithing in particular look like for you during that time?
You're right, Sharon and I have, for the last 30 years or more that we've been in the community, have tithed, and we've always felt like that the 10% was the basis, and sometimes we've been asked and expected to give more. When we listen to God how we should use our resources, then sometimes God has asked us to do over and above the 10%, and we've been quite comfortable doing that as well.
Yeah, right. Surely over those 30 years there's been difficulties or tough times that you've gone through. How have you looked upon that, with especially in the light of tithing and what that's looked like for you?
Well, Mark, for the tithing was never difficult. The 10% was an expectation and a duty that we obliged and did without failure, because that, like I said before, was like our training. We knew that was what you were expected to do, and that's what we did. So the difficult part is not giving the 10%. It's maybe in the other 90% where you need to be a little bit more shrewd or diligent or better trained in how you're going to manage that 90%. But I must say the 10% was never difficult. It was the first fruits. You give your first fruits and you worry about the 90%.
Yeah, right. Emma, the Bible talks about tithing and links it back to there. Have you experienced blessings through your tithing?
Yeah, definitely. I've noticed that in my own life. I can think of 2 examples recently where things have happened. One time I remember this one week when I was like struggling a bit. I'm just like, oh God, this like 10% that I was planning to give could really be helpful this week. But then I'm like, no, I've committed to this, I'm going to give it. And so I gave it, and I remember going to my parents and I'm like, oh, I should probably just sleep over here tonight because I can't really afford the petrol to go home. And then just randomly, like, I don't even still know why, like, it was so weird. My dad just decided to give my sisters and I this huge fuel voucher, and it's just like worked out so perfectly. Just being able to help me out in that way. And then another time I'm planning to hopefully like go away next year, somewhere where I feel like God's calling me. And when I sat down to do my budget to see if it was realistic or not, I was just like, oh, like, God, I know that you're planning to call me here. Should I put my tithes into this? But then I'm like, no, like, I've committed like 10% going to Emmanuel. So I'm like, oh, I'm still not sure if I can afford this or not. And but I decided to trust in God, and like, I still kept tithing. And I applied one night to do this thing, and then first thing the next morning I went into work and they offered me a full-time job, which was like, just like, there's so many, like, looking back over the past 4 years, like, there's been so many examples of that where just God's provided. Like, I've chosen to trust in Him, and just He's come through. Like, yeah.
Yeah, right. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Tom, I know you and Sharon have attended some financial courses on financial stability and best ways of looking after your money. And what propelled you, or what compelled you to go into those and to look into those areas?
Well, I think, Mark, you know, like I said before, this is money that God has given to us. It's a resource that we have. So I always felt like that we need to be responsible how we use it and how we manage that money. So I think we just wanted to increase our wisdom and our knowledge as to how money can be used and how it can be used in God's ways. So we went and found 2 courses. One was particularly good, run by a Pentecostal church, and was very good. And the other one was more for financial management within business. But it's about that, Mark, I must say that it's about working out what to do with that 90%. Mm-hmm. The 10% is like, that is given, that it's going to go to God, or to God's work, or to the upbuilding of the church. Working out what to do with that 90%. I can remember when Sharon and I were seriously thinking about our lives, and you know, we had 4 children, single job, and bills coming in all over the place. And then you'd start to think and question, well, you know, like that 10% could be used maybe for a better holiday, or you know, or a trip away or something. But you just realise that by doing things in a godly manner and praying through situations, then God has a plan for your money as well. And I also must say, Mark, that at the end of the year, when Sharon and I look and see at our bank balance, and we say to ourselves, how did this happen? You know, where did this money come from? Mm-hmm. You know, it's like we're not financial wizards or financial gurus or something like that, but we just know that somehow or other something happens because you start to think, what is God's way? And God's plan is a perfect plan, you know. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. What would your encouragement be to a young person who's journeying through that and looks at the community and goes, yes, I personally want to be a part of this, and I want to give my life to the Lord, and I am, but still has that, it's almost that difficulty, that trust, or that tension of, but how am I going to survive? You know, what would you say to somebody going through or experiencing that and being in that place, you know?
Well, it's all about knowing, firstly, if you do surrender your life to Jesus, if you say, I give my all to Jesus, it is everything. You come into the world with nothing, you're going to leave the world with nothing. In between is what God gives you to sustain you. So it's asking God, or saying to God, look, I surrender everything to you, my wife, my children, my money, my car, my house. Mm-hmm. I give it all to you. You tell me what you want me to do with it. And He has a way of saying, or getting through to you, this is what I would like you to do with this. You know, and so I suppose it's really learning to be full of faith, you know, to living a life that is faith-filled. And it's when you start to understand that the Spirit will speak to you, that God will reveal His plan to you, to how to use your finances, then things start to happen.
Yeah. Emma, I know you said that you trusted with what the community was doing with it, but I also know you're involved with some of the ministries that are supported by Tithe. Speaking to an audience that isn't always on the front line, what would you say about that? What would you say that your experience has been the blessing of that tithe working in your ministry? What does that look like for you?
Well, first of all, like, I think that my faith and my life where it's at now is a direct product of people like yourself who've been investing into the community for so long that could put on like that first Ignite that I went to all those many years ago. So thank you so much for all the tithing that you've been doing.
Absolutely.
But then more recently, it's such a support for, I'm involved a fair bit with the high school ministries, and just being able to just buy physical things for students, like on birthdays and everything, and like events, like we've got QCS coming up, so we're able to have some funding for some QCS kits, and it just really helps to get into touch with students who have like the love language of gifts and everything. That's so useful. And another side of it is we've got such an incredible leadership team who like give so much, and so when we ask them to come to a meeting, some of them have come from a full day of work and won't get home until 10, maybe 11 o'clock at night. So being able to provide them with dinner between that, like that's just such a blessing, and I feel like it's something that they really deserve and everything. So yeah, that's really helpful.
It's interesting you say that. I sit here and, you know, I grew up in a really Catholic family where tithing was a big thing. Mum and Dad did it pretty religiously, you know, pardon the pun. And they literally would. I remember Mum pulling out $2 for a loaf of bread. You know, writing a check for $2 for a loaf of bread, and watching them struggle to do that, and yet always being faithful. And seeing that and wanting to emulate that, I guess, in my own life has been really hard. I found it really difficult, and always wanting to stay diligent to that. I guess for me personally, I've been in ministry for a long time, and I've really struggled with the tithe and what that looks like, you know, the technicalities and all the rest of that, rather than trying to focus on what is God asking of me. But in the struggle of, okay, God, you're asking me to give this amount, and I need to be faithful to that no matter what. You know, I've got 3 children now. We're on one wage, and it is really tough. You know, and I know a lot of people experience that toughness, but it is, you know, sometimes it feels all encompassing. And I know because I know our God, and I know how He works. I know that there is goodness there, and that there is a plan there, and what He requires of me is what I can do. But it's that faithfulness, you know. That's me still being on that. Does that make sense? Like, it must have been, you know. It's good to see the ideal, but you know, just sitting in there at the moment, I'm still not there, you know.
Yeah. Well, Mark, you know, I have to remember that when I was doing what I did in the early days, when we had 4 children, you know, paying off a house, wanting to put them through private Catholic education, all those things. In those days, on a single income, I could do that if I was prepared to work on that 90%, you know, make sure that we weren't being wasteful, you know, not buying excessive, maybe using second-hand things instead of buying brand new. These days, I observe my children, all of them need 2 incomes to pay off a house, struggle hard to put the children through private education, and they do it tougher than what Sharon and I did. I'm not saying that they shouldn't tithe, but they have to work on getting that 90% or that other end financially astute. You know, they need to be aware that money can be used more wisely, and don't worry about that 10%. That is just got to be given. Yeah,
it really does come down to financial management. I know for me and a lot of people that I've journeyed with, even faithful people, sticking to that ideal of, you know, the 10% or working towards that anyway. There's not a whole lot of people, even in the mainstream churches, that really follow that.
Yeah, I think I definitely find it is a bit abnormal, but I think once you start, especially being like a single young person, it's so much easier now. Like, yes, I've been through uni and like not being able to work and being at uni, like uni students are always poor, but I think I'm a lot better. Like being at uni is a lot easier than having 3 children and a wife on 1 salary. So I think if you don't get started on it early and you keep saying, oh, I'll tithe when I have money, I'll tithe when it's easy, it's never going to be easy. So it's best to, as soon as possible, start those lessons and start trusting in God.
Yeah, they really are. Like you're saying, Emma, that at an early age, or as quickly as you possibly can, when you become a Christian, if you do start that 10% and just lock it in, when things get tough, it is like, I know that 10% is always going to go to the kingdom of God as a requirement of Jesus. And the rest of it will come, It comes as a result of your faithfulness, and it's training, it's teaching you to be full of faith, to know that God can just send money out of the fish's mouth. He doesn't need the ways of the world to provide for his people, to provide for his children. He will give as required.
I really want to thank you so much for coming along tonight and for talking with us. And thank you so much for sharing your experiences here tonight, guys.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Well, listening to those stories and those testimonies of what the Lord's doing in their lives and what the Lord's doing in the community's life, it's exciting. It's exciting to be part of that. This is step number one as part of a new process that we're putting together. And I really encourage you to break open this topic of tithing more and more. For some of you, you've been doing this for a long time, and thank you so much. For others, I ask you to look again, or to look for the first time at what you're doing and what the Lord is doing with your finances and with tithing. I really ask you to go and search out. There's plenty of really good podcasts out there, plenty of really good books and resources. Please go to the Emmanuel website, go and have a look on there. There's going to be plenty of information on and around this subject. As well as that, one of the things that we're looking to develop in the future is a financial planning seminar and sessions. And I really encourage you to get a part of that and to be part of that, to allow the Lord to bless your finances and to give in a more generous way as well. So thank you once again for joining us today. I'm really excited about how the Lord is going to grow the life and mission of the community as we respond generously to his call.